King Song S20. It's probably the hottest electric unicycle of 2022, with a long pre-order list that went all the way back to the middle of last year. It is also the very first 126 volt and the fastest wheel King Song has ever produced, with the longest suspension travel and a claimed top speed of 45 miles per hour.
This week we put all that to the test and review the King Song S20. Roll the intro.
Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and we'll be BFF forever.
First, a shout out to Jason at eWheel for lending me this S20 for review purposes, but as always, opinion expressed is strictly my own.
Now we are in a curious place. You see, last fall when Gauntlet announced the suspension-equipped 100-volt Hero, King Song completely stole that wheel's thunder by the introduction of the S20. Now, 5 months later, when they're finally ready to ship the S20, Gauntlet is attempting to return the favor by announcing the 134-volt suspension-equipped Master.
Now, despite their many similarities, some not quite as accidental as they made you to believe, the King Song S20 and the Gauntlet Master are in fact vastly different wheels intended for very different audiences. King Song didn't go to 126 volt to win some kind of race against the two fast EUC companies, Gauntlet and Veteran. They went to 126 volts so that they can achieve 45 miles an hour on their own turn, which requires much larger safety margin, and in many aspects, the S20 reflected its unique King Song heritage. Now moving on to the reviews, as usual, I'm gonna rate this wheel based on 5 different criteria, and they are convenience, design, performance, ride qualities, and finally, value, all on a score of 0 to 5.
And let's start with convenience. The S20 is a very tall wheel, as you may have noticed. It is partly to accommodate the significantly larger suspension assembly with a longer travel, and also partly to fit the expanded battery packs.
And because of its height, the fact that it comes with a built-in seat, and that it has an excellent suspension system, the S20 is a very comfortable wheel to sit at. The stock seat is slightly on the thin side, and the taller pedal height means that you are in a more squatted position and makes it slightly more challenging to control the wheel while seated, but that ought to teach you not to be so darn lazy about riding an electric unicycle, right? And of course there is the signature, the signature King Song trolley handle, which makes wheeling the wheel around straightforward. It isn't as well balanced as the other past King Song wheels, and it actually also helps with mounting the wheel considering its tall pedal height in tricky situations.
There's now an additional pair of handles that make lifting the wheel easier, helpful considering that at 75 pounds, this is also the heaviest King Song wheel ever. The fender work decently well and have good coverage, and there's also now a kickstand, a surprising miss on most other electric unicycles. The headlights are bright and adjustable, a huge improvement comparing to its predecessor, the S18, and there's also much more visible and functional tail light. There's a decent sized LED numerical display up top that provide crucial information like speed or battery level. It is not a full color display like the Emotion V12, but I actually prefer this since it is also much more legible and usable to me even in direct sunlight. And finally, minus the factory pad, the side of the wheel is actually very flat and easy to customize with whatever your preferred power pad setup. And yes, it does
does ruin the striking good look of this wheel, but considering the popularity of this wheel, I am confident that aftermarket pad designer would quickly come up with something appropriately stylish. Overall, this is a well thought out and decently convenient package, and seems to come from someone who not only rides but also live with an electric unicycle on a day-to-day basis, and it gets a 4.5 out of 5 for convenience. Next, we have design. Now, I personally actually still prefer the look of the original suspension S18 wheel from King Song from that teenage boy poster in a bedroom perspective. However, I do have to say that all the aesthetic sacrifices King Song had made on this wheel were all for practical reason to make it easier to service and mod. And so from that perspective, I also think that this is a spectacularly beautiful wheel.
The generously sized wheel well made it easier to clean after a muddy ride and provides a world of options when it comes to tire choices, and the custom sculpted rim show a level of care and attention to detail I have not seen with any other EUC manufacturers, including in motion. And that pragmatic approach continues with an oversized hollow pedal design, which can be raised by about ½ an inch if you like more ground clearances.
And that assembly is mounted on one of the stiffest structural framing I've ever seen on an electric unicycle, consisting of a pair of forks in the front and in the back, with the metal battery compartment spanning between these two sets of ribs.
Overall, out of the 4 EUC companies, King Song has shown the most willingness to experiment, and they have fully embraced the modular approach for the S20, which not only made it easier to service, but also opened up possibility for component upgrades in the future. However, when it comes to production quality and detailing, emotions still edge ahead. The quality of the plastic feels a bit cheap, and you can see mold line and unevenness with casting it. Even with so few demo wheel floating around, there had already been multiple reports of breakage, but none of that takes away from the sheer presence of this wheel. Electric unicycle tend to be nondescript, bland-looking black boxes, but not so for the S20. This is a wheel that looks as exciting as it is to ride, and for that the S20 gets a 5 out of 5 for design.
Next, let's talk about performance. Now, I have to reiterate again that for a company that had for a long time insisting on keeping the top speed of their wheel below 30 miles per hour, the intention for going to 126 volt were never to produce a wheel that could compete in a race against either Gotway or Veteran, but it was to push the speed envelope while still maintaining the traditionally much larger safety margin that King Song is known for. And that translated to a wheel with a free spin speed on part of that of the EXN, while still maintaining an artificially capped top speed of 43 miles per hour, which ensure that there is ample safety margin even if you were to be pushing the speed limit on this wheel.
A Sherman or a Monster Pro is faster, but at 50 miles per hour, you're also pushing past the warning beeps and on the razor edge of cutout disasters. So in reality, and for us responsible adults, those wheels are really only about 2 to 3 miles per hour faster, a margin that is likely not terribly noticeable at that kind of speed. The torque output and acceleration similarly felt comparable with the high torque Gotways thanks to the 126 volt system, and that is an achievement. A high torque wheel capable of not only hitting but sustaining 45 miles per hour, and if you think that this wheel isn't fast, then you and your technique is the problem and not the wheel. But the real showstopper here is, of course, the suspension system, and here is where the S20 truly shines. The longer travel and superior coil shock all contributed to a system that truly dampen and soak up whatever adverse condition you may encounter. Hitting a pothole at 35 miles an hour in the wet on this wheel is an absolute revelation. The main purpose for better suspension is to improve traction, and better traction translates directly to better power transfer, better braking, and control.
The S20 gets a 4.5 out of 5 for performance, not only for power and speed, but also for a suspension system that is truly next gen. Now that you know what it can do, let's talk about how it does it, which brings us to Rye Feel. Now, despite having power to spare, the firmware as is firmly bring in what this wheel is allowed to do, and in that regard puts a slight damper on the fun factor. Gauntlet wheels traditionally exhibited a grunty, powerful ride, while the veteran Sherman felt like a squealing bat out of hell, but the S20 felt somewhat subdued by comparison. But the S20 is fast, I have no doubt about it, and what it lacks in motor feedback, it made up with what felt to be a limitless well of tempered power. And once again, the suspension tips the scale here. The spongy goodness brings along consistency and improved grip, which let you better connect with the riding surfaces, and that build trust and reduce guesswork, which then let you focus on technique and add a whole nother dimension onto the traditional ride experience. And for a unicycle with a single point of ground connection, this improved grip is an absolute game changer. And for that, the S20 gets a 4.5 out of 5 for Rye Feel. Finally, let's talk about that most elusive quality, which is, of course, value. And let me say that on the scale of sexy, bleeding edge technology, gadgetry, the S20 is a solid 11 out of 10 by look and performance. In the past, I have questioned my own sanity for paying as much as I did on a plasticky and cheap-looking gauntlet, but the King Song S20, on the other hand, I doubt anyone will regret their choice as they pull this sexy wheel out of the box. Just ooze that sense of raw excitement, and I have never gotten as much attention and question as I did with the S20 when I wheel it about the New York City. From ladies in business suit to 5-year-old boy, everyone wants to know what it is, how much it is, and where they can get one. For just north of 3 large ones, slightly less than what you will pay for a brand new Sherman Max, and sacrificing about 5 miles per hour marginal speed advantage, you get what is very likely to be the best in class suspension performance of this generation. And for the majority of EUC rider, I say that the King Song S20 is very likely the better choice for you. As a matter of fact, this wheel is so good that it boggles my mind what emotion Gauntlet and veteran would have to build in order to just compete with it.
And I wanted to take a moment here to say that this wheel truly highlighted how far electric unicycle have come. From the humble roots of toys capable of no more than 10-15 miles per hour to this extraordinary machine, King Song took a leap of faith with the suspension on the S18 and another with the 126-volt electrical system, and here we have, 4 years later, the culmination of all their efforts. The King Song S20 is the most exciting electric unicycle I have ever ridden and gets a 5 out of 5 for value for raising the bar on what is possible. So what do you think? Are you psyched about the S20, or are you a die-hard speedster and would never live without your Sherman? Well, that is what the comment section below is for. And you know what? Aha! I somehow managed to trick you into wasting another 15 minutes of your life, but I hope you enjoyed it. Shout out to my supporter on Patreon. Please check out the link in the video description below if you enjoy and like to support my work. And as always, as much as we all love electric unicycle, the only way for us to get better wheel is to grow as a community. So tell your friend and teach them how to ride and get them hooked. Until the next video, thank you.
Back with the jump on. Lock the chain.